General Hospital will reveal. Willow stood frozen in disbelief as the words sank in. She had just received the heart-wrenching news that Michael had outright refused to meet with her. Despite her having flown all the way to Baden-Baden, Germany, in the hopes of seeing him. Every ounce of effort, every minute spent on the long journey, seemed wasted in an instant. A profound sense of abandonment hit her like a tidal wave, and with it, a sharp sting of betrayal. Her stomach turned, her heart sank. And the overwhelming anger bubbling inside her was impossible to suppress. She had believed, so desperately, that everything would work out, that this meeting would be the moment they could reconnect and move forward together. But instead, it felt as if every hope and dream she had been holding on to had been shattered in the blink of an eye. How could this be happening? It didn't make sense. It was a gut-wrenching blow, and yet, there it was, the painful reality staring her in the face. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what had gone wrong. The disbelief turned into confusion, then spiraled into frustration. Willow could barely keep herself from crumbling under the weight of it all. Why would Michael, the man she trusted and loved, suddenly cut her off like this? Her mind began to question everything, the timing, the circumstances. Had she done something wrong? Had she missed a sign? The questions were endless. And each one only made the ache in her chest grow deeper. Sasha, having heard Willow's account, could barely hold herself together. The shock of the revelation was too much to bear. She had known Willow for a long time, and she had never seen her friend so devastated. Without hesitation, Sasha reached out to Jason, knowing that he needed to hear this firsthand. She quickly relayed the details of what Willow had just told her, and the news hit Jason like a cold splash of water. Jason had known Michael for years. And the idea that Michael would ever turn Willow away was unfathomable to him. He had seen Michael's vulnerability, his deep affection for Willow, and he knew that this was not how Michael operated. His instincts told him something was terribly wrong. The rejection didn't align with the Michael he knew. He had to know more. Jason wasn't the type to just sit back and accept things without investigating. The gears in his mind began to turn. There had to be more to this story, something didn't add up. Jason's first step was to confirm the details directly with Michael. He couldn't just take Sasha and Willow's word for it. The possibility that something was being hidden gnawed at him. It was unlike Michael to behave in such a cold, heartless way, especially when it came to Willow. Jason needed clarity, needed answers. He picked up the phone and called Michael, hoping that the truth would come to light. As the conversation unfolded, the truth hit Jason like a punch to the gut. Michael hadn't known a thing about Willow's visit. He had no idea she had traveled all that way. There was no meeting planned, no rejection. Michael was completely in the dark about the whole situation. The revelation rocked Jason to his core. Drew, the man he had known for years, was behind this. Drew had orchestrated the entire thing in secret, manipulating the situation to keep Willow away from Michael. Jason's mind raced, replaying every detail he had learned. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was deliberate. Drew had intentionally prevented Willow from seeing Michael. And for reasons Jason couldn't yet understand, he had done so with calculated precision. Jason's suspicions about Drew, who had always been a bit of a wild card, had finally been confirmed. There was no simple explanation for Drew's actions, it was clear that something much deeper and more sinister was at play. Jason knew he had to get to the bottom of it. He couldn't let Drew get away with this, especially when it involved someone as close to him as Willow. The pain and confusion Willow was now experiencing were no accident. They were the result of Drew's manipulation. Jason quickly realized that he couldn't let this go unaddressed. There was no turning back now. He needed to dig deeper and find the answers. No matter how uncomfortable it might be. If Drew was involved in hiding the truth, Jason knew that he could use this to his advantage. There was a way to make Drew pay for his actions. A way to expose his lies and bring him down. But that would take time, patience, and strategy. Jason didn't want to alert Drew just yet, but he couldn't let the truth remain buried. The secrets Drew was keeping were about to be exposed, and Willow would finally get the answer she deserved. The weight of the situation wasn't lost on Jason, though. While he had the upper hand with this newfound knowledge, he knew the pain it would cause Willow once the truth came out. She would never forgive Drew for what he had done. Nor would she easily move past the betrayal. Jason understood that, but he also knew that the longer this deception went on, the more damage it would do. The truth was the only way forward. Even if it meant shattering Willow's world all over again. At this moment, Jason's mind raced as the full weight of the situation sank in. He had suspected for some time that something wasn't right. But now it was clear. Drew was behind everything. It wasn't Michael who had rejected Willow, as she had believed, but Drew, who had manipulated the situation in secret. Drew had orchestrated the entire chain of events, ensuring that Willow's hopes of reconnecting with Michael would be shattered. Jason could feel the anger building inside him as he thought about the extent of Drew's deceit. Drew had always been a wild card, unpredictable and often playing by his own rules. But this was different. This was a deliberate act of betrayal, something that went beyond their usual games and manipulations. Jason couldn't let this go unchecked. He had always been a man of action. Quick to make decisions and even quicker to act. But this time, something inside him hesitated. There was a moment. A single flicker of doubt that stopped him from rushing in and exposing Drew immediately. Jason knew that if he played his cards right, he could use Drew's actions against him. If Drew could manipulate the truth and control the situation from behind the scenes, then Jason could do the same. This knowledge gave him power, a weapon to use against Drew when the time was right. He wasn't just going to let Drew get away with it, but he also understood that rushing into a confrontation could make things even worse. Jason knew that the longer this charade went on, the more complicated things would become. Exposing Drew's treachery in the heat of the moment might backfire. There was too much at stake, too many people who could be hurt in the process. But there was another layer to Jason's reasoning. He wasn't blind to the emotional toll this would take on Willow. She had already been through so much, and this revelation would devastate her. The last thing Jason wanted was to pile more pain onto her already fragile heart. Willow had already suffered the crushing blow of being turned away by Michael. She had no idea that it wasn't Michael's decision, and now she was left in the dark, confused and broken. Jason understood the depth of her pain, and revealing the truth to her now, when she was at her most vulnerable, might break her beyond repair. Jason's protective instincts kicked in. He knew that Willow, despite everything, still held on to a shred of hope that things could be fixed. If she learned that Drew had intentionally kept her from Michael, it would destroy that last bit of hope. She had been through so much already, grief, heartbreak, and confusion, and Jason wasn't sure if she was strong enough to handle another blow like this. Willow wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was someone who had always tried to stay strong, to hold on to love and family despite the odds. But now, with Drew's actions laid bare, that sense of security she had been clinging to would crumble. Jason couldn't be the one to do that to her, not when she was already hanging by a thread. Despite his anger and his desire to right this wrong immediately, Jason's mind kept coming back to one thought: patience. He needed to wait. There was more to this situation than met the eye. And exposing Drew prematurely might lead to complications neither he nor Willow were ready to face. There was a certain strategic advantage to keeping the truth hidden for a while longer. Jason knew how to play the long game. He would wait for the perfect moment to strike, when Drew would be most vulnerable, when everything would align in his favor. The temptation to take immediate action was strong, but Jason knew that sometimes, the best weapon was silence. In the meantime, Jason would continue to watch, to observe. He would learn everything he could about Drew's movements, his plans, and any mistakes he might make along the way. The longer Drew thought he had control over the situation, the more careless he might become. Jason's mind raced with the possibilities. He wasn't going to rush this, he was going to let Drew hang himself with his own lies. But as he considered all of this, Jason's heart ached for Willow. She had trusted Drew, perhaps more than she had trusted anyone else. She had no idea that the man she had confided in was the very one betraying her. And in the depths of his protective instincts, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that, by keeping this truth from Willow, he was prolonging her suffering. How much longer could he let her believe in a lie? Was it fair to keep her in the dark, even if it meant protecting her from the immediate pain of knowing the truth? For now, Jason would do what he did best, he would wait. He would let Drew think he was getting away with it, let him believe that he had outsmarted everyone. But Jason knew the truth would come out eventually, and when it did, Drew would have no place to hide. Meanwhile, Willow remained completely unaware of the true extent of the manipulation she was caught in. As she continued down the path of misunderstanding, her feelings of betrayal deepened, growing stronger with each passing day. She was drowning in her own pain, consumed by the false hope that she could still repair the fragile relationship she had with Michael. Every step she took, every decision she made, seemed to pull her further into a web of lies that she couldn't see. The truth was right beneath her nose, but it remained hidden in the shadows, carefully controlled by Drew, who knew exactly how to pull the strings and keep her from seeing the reality. Willow had no idea that the man she trusted most, Drew, was the one who had been manipulating her from the very beginning. His actions were calculated, methodical, and hidden behind a facade of concern. To Willow, Drew was the ally, the friend who had always been there for her, offering support when she needed it most. She never imagined that he was the one responsible for the pain she was now experiencing. Every tear she shed, every moment of confusion, was part of the plan Drew had set in motion. And she was completely blind to it. The more Willow fell deeper into the lies, the more she clung to the hope that somehow things could be made right. She believed that if she could just prove herself, if she could show Michael how much she cared, everything would fall into place. Little did she know that the entire situation had been sabotaged from the start, and no matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to escape the grip of Drew's deceit. Jason, on the other hand, watched from the sidelines, wrestling with the decision he knew he had to make. He saw Willow's suffering, and he understood the weight of the secret he was carrying. The temptation to reveal the truth to her was strong, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that exposing everything right now would only make things worse. He knew that if he told Willow what had really happened, the floodgates would open, and the pain she was already carrying would become unbearable. She wasn't ready for the truth. And he didn't want to be the one to destroy whatever small piece of hope she had left. But as days passed and Willow continued to spiral, Jason knew that if he didn't act soon, things would only get worse. The longer Drew's lies went unchallenged, the more deeply entrenched Willow would become in a reality that wasn't hers to begin with. She would continue to live in a false world, thinking she could fix something that had already been broken beyond repair. If Jason didn't step in, Willow would remain trapped in Drew's web of deceit. And by the time she found out the truth, it might be too late for her to recover. Jason understood the consequences of his silence, but he was torn. He wanted to protect Willow from the immediate heartbreak, but he also knew that, sooner or later, the truth would come out. The longer it was delayed, the more devastating it would be. And when that truth finally came crashing down, it would leave Willow with a broken heart and a shattered sense of trust. Drew's betrayal would be a wound so deep that it might take years for her to heal, if she ever could. Jason was caught in a battle between his protective instincts and the harsh reality of the situation. He didn't want to break Willow any further. But he also knew that she couldn't live in the dark forever. The lies that Drew had woven around her would eventually come undone, and when they did, it would unleash a series of painful consequences that Willow could never have anticipated. Jason wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing by holding back, but he couldn't shake the feeling that, for now, silence was the lesser of two evils. But as time wore on, he realized that every day he stayed quiet, the weight of the secret became heavier, not just for him, but for Willow as well. She deserved the truth, even if it meant facing the pain that would come with it. The storm was coming, and when it hit, it would change everything. Drew's betrayal, once exposed, would push Willow into a whirlwind of emotional turmoil. Jason couldn't protect her from the inevitable, but for now, he was willing to let the truth stay buried, hoping that when it finally surfaced, Willow would be strong enough to survive it. Despite everything, Jason saw Drew's betrayal as just a small part of a much larger, more intricate plan, a plan that was slowly taking shape in the back of his mind. Jason had always been someone who kept a level head, who thought several steps ahead. And this situation was no different. He knew that, sooner or later, Drew's web of lies would collapse under its own weight. Jason wasn't the type to rush into things. He understood that timing was everything. The truth about Drew's manipulation would come out, but when it did, Jason wanted to be the one who controlled how it happened, not Drew. Jason wasn't in any hurry. He was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He understood the value of patience, how, sometimes, allowing the situation to unfold naturally could lead to a greater victory than forcing things to move too quickly. For now, he was content to let the events play out, allowing Drew to believe he was getting away with his deceit, unaware that Jason was silently watching, observing every move, every mistake. The longer Drew thought he was in control, the more vulnerable he would become. Jason knew this well, and he was willing to let Drew dig his own hole, making himself increasingly reckless as the pressure of maintaining his lies built up. The day would come when Drew's carefully constructed world of manipulation would crumble, and when it did, Jason would be ready. But until then, he would let the situation evolve, letting Drew think he had the upper hand, all the while setting his own trap. However, this plan wasn't without its toll. While Jason focused on the bigger picture, he couldn't ignore the pain that Willow was experiencing. Every day, she was getting deeper and deeper into a maze of lies, unaware of the true forces working behind the scenes. Jason knew she was suffering. She didn't deserve to be deceived like this, and yet, he couldn't bring himself to expose the truth just yet. He wasn't sure if she was ready to handle it. The last thing he wanted was for her to be crushed by the full weight of Drew's betrayal all at once. He understood the emotional devastation it would cause her. And it was hard to justify revealing it to her while she was still so vulnerable. In the back of his mind, Jason understood that the truth would not only hurt Willow but would also raise difficult questions, questions about trust, loyalty, and the very foundation of their relationships. How could she ever trust Drew again? How would she feel knowing that the man she had relied on was the one responsible for tearing apart her world? And what would it do to her trust in those closest to her, including Jason himself? These were the questions Jason feared might haunt her long after the truth was revealed. But Jason also knew that keeping the truth hidden would only prolong the pain. Drew's manipulation wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a calculated series of actions designed to keep Willow in the dark. If Jason didn't step in and bring the truth to light, Willow would never have a chance to heal or move forward. She would remain trapped in a cycle of confusion and heartbreak, never knowing the full extent of what was happening to her. As much as Jason wanted to protect Willow, he knew that the longer he waited, the more complex the situation would become. The lies would snowball, and the trust that had once existed between Willow and Drew would be completely destroyed. The longer Drew had control, the more damage he could cause, not just to Willow, but to everyone who had been unknowingly caught in his scheme. Jason couldn't let that happen. But he wasn't willing to rush in blindly either. For now, Jason remained silent, his plan unfolding in the background, carefully calculated. But as time passed, the weight of his silence began to wear on him. He could see the toll it was taking on Willow, how she was slowly becoming more and more consumed by the lies. How she was slowly losing herself in a world built on falsehoods. He wanted to do something for her, to end her suffering. But the truth was, revealing everything right now could destroy her. In the quiet moments when Jason found himself alone with his thoughts, he grappled with the complexity of his decision. On one hand, he wanted nothing more than to see Drew pay for what he had done. To expose him and set things right for Willow. On the other hand, Jason knew that timing was everything. He wasn't just protecting Willow from the truth. He was protecting her from the fallout that would come with it. The emotional damage would be far-reaching, and he wasn't sure if she could handle it all at once. Jason's inner conflict continued to grow as he watched Willow struggle, day after day, unaware of the betrayal that had taken root in her life. He knew he couldn't keep silent forever. At some point, the truth would have to come out. But for now, he chose to hold back. Waiting for the right moment when Willow would be strong enough to hear the truth, and when the impact of that truth wouldn't be as devastating as it would be if exposed too soon. In the meantime, Jason would continue to play the long game, carefully observing, waiting for the right time to strike. He knew the day would come when Drew's lies would be exposed, and when that day arrived, Jason would make sure that Willow finally had the truth she deserved, no matter how painful it might be.